Broadcasting live from the Business RadioX studios in Denver, Colorado, it's time for Franchise Bible Coach Radio. Now, here are your hosts.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Franchise Bible Coach Radio podcast with Rick and Rob. And Rob, we have two Robs for you today. So two Robs are better than one, right, Rob?
That's right.
Rob and Rob. So everybody, our special guest today is Rob Cecil from Alair Homes, and he's their Chief Development Officer. So he's our special guest. We're excited to hear more about their gold nuggets of wisdom they're going to share with us today. But we'll get into an introduction for Rob in just a second. So I'm going to just give you some information about the Fight for Your Franchise Challenge at franchisebiblecoach.com. You can join the fight, folks, if you haven't done so yet. Even though we're coming to the tail end of the initial 12 weeks, that doesn't mean it's too late. You can join the Fight for Your Franchise Challenge and then go back and review the archived coaching sessions, video sessions, podcasts, articles are all archived on the website. Usually they're about a week or two behind. So what you really want to do is get signed up on the email sign up so that you get those weekly emails in your inbox every week that will give you the free coaching session, the podcast, the article, and the invitation to participate in the franchise Facebook page. So check that out at franchisebiblecoach.com and join the Fight for Your Franchise Challenge. It's a free initiative, once again, just our way of giving back to the industry that we love. And we're going to get right into it now. And I'm going to introduce Rob Ganley, my co-host, to get started. Hey, Rob.
Hey, Rick. How are you? It's good to be here. And Rob, I appreciate you. Rob Cecil, Chief Development Officer of Alair Homes. We appreciate you. Before we get started, I also want to thank our sponsor, SEO Samba. They are the inventor of a very unique platform called the Franchise Marketing Operating System, the first one of its kind. And so you can check more out at SEOsamba.com. So Rob, it's good to have you here today. We're in interesting times. So as we get started here in our conversation, tell us a little bit about Alair Homes, about yourself, about how Alair came to be and how you became Chief Development Officer.
Yeah, well, first, thank you, Rick and Rob, for having me, as well as Alair here. So it's quite the honor. So Alair Homes started in British Columbia, which is where our home office still is, in Nanaimo, BC. Back in 2007, it was founded by a guy by the name of Blair McDaniel. And Blair started, his background was framing, did a lot of major commercial framing, things like that. And then he had a family friend, who approached him to build their custom home. And having worked in the commercial space, he said, look, the only way that I would consider doing this is if we would do all of the planning up front and confirm all of the costs and all of the selections and everything that would go in to building your home. And we would know all of that up front before we ever go into construction, because I'm more interested in maintaining our relationship than I am building that home. And so from there, it was an idea that was really taken from the commercial space. As most builders know, you would never go in and do a large commercial project of any sort without typically the investor and the developers and everyone knowing exactly what everything is going to cost before you start digging. But oddly enough, in a residential space, it's just one of those industries where so often, guys, you have the homeowner and you have the builder who go into an agreement. One agrees to purchase the new home that's being built. The other one agrees to build it, and neither one of them actually know how much it costs. So it's an odd thing. We just don't typically do that, but the home industry has been dealing that way for, frankly, a couple hundred years. So that worked out really well. And from there, Alair Homes was launched. And in about 2009, Blair decided he wanted to open another office down in Victoria. And it wasn't long before he was realizing that the same experience that his clients were getting up in the Nanaimo region the same thing wasn't happening down in Victoria. And so what he realized was that even though it was only an hour and a half, 2 hours by car, that there was no way to really be able to manage remotely and get the same quality and the same commitment from the team there, even though they knew what they were doing. About that same time, somebody that he knew reached out to him from Edmonton, Alberta, and said, hey, look, I'm launching a new construction company, but I don't want to build out all the infrastructure. Could I borrow your people and just use your back end? You've got an accounting team, you've got all these operations, you got this new software. Could I just basically, could you lend it to me? Believe it or not, that was the beginning of the franchise model, because that was in 2012 when they finally put the first office in Edmonton. We're now, 8 years into franchising, and we have 122 operating offices today, and we tend to grow somewhere in the neighborhood of 2 to 5 units a quarter.
That's not a bad clip.
It's been interesting. Our first U.S. office was in late 2014, and we're in 15 states today. So over that 6 years, we've seen some real growth.
Yeah, congratulations. That's not an easy feat. Whenever I hear people over 100, I always say that's a nice place to be, above 100, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And with that growth, of course, comes a lot of challenges, but we're pretty satisfied with the way things are going. And there was a significant shift in our business model right around 2015, where we had made a decision. We were no longer going to take on a new franchisee that did not already have an existing business. So we made a conscious decision to move, if you will, out of the startup world and into the conversion, or as we like to call it, transformation space. So our goal is to go out, seek out the top 10% of all existing builders, remodelers, or renovators, as they call them in Canada, and convert them into Alair franchisees. And so that's been a central component to a lot of our growth.
Makes sense.
Wow. Conversions. That's awesome. So your model's a little different than a lot of the folks we've been interviewing over the last couple of months during the Fight for Your Franchise Challenge, Rob. We have restaurants, and we've had fitness operators and the such, and retail type businesses. Tell us a little bit about how COVID-19 has reshaped your business model and how it's impacted your franchisees, your brand overall.
Well, first of all, my heart goes out to the guys you're just talking about. I know it's been a particularly challenging period for them. And I have some friends in that space. And so I know that's been a really, really tough thing. It's interesting because when COVID hit, we, as an executive team, I'm on an executive team with 4 other members. We had just made a new set of really large growth plans at the end of February. And what we call our Black Friday, which was March 13th, is when we realized we needed to do something rapidly fast and also quite substantial, and to ensure that, we didn't know what we didn't know at the time. And so we knew that the first order of business was to make sure that when we got to the quote unquote other side of this, that there was a strong franchisor system that was still there to come back to. And so we made some really swift moves. But it's interesting, guys, because we, in most of our markets, were considered essential. Mm-hmm. That is obviously very different than, I apologize for that, than many of the others you've been speaking about. But it didn't come without its challenges, because we had some regions where, as we call them, we have different regions, and our business model is based on regional partners, and then our franchisees are known as partners. We had some of our regions that were essentially shut off. So Ontario, for example, if a permit had already been pulled and you had already started construction, you could continue, albeit you had to do it in a new, defined, safe, social distance way. So that created its own set of challenges, but no new permits were being pulled. And just literally that just changed back this past week. Then we had some other markets that saw a significant spike in new inquiries for people looking to either buy and remodel or to build new homes. And it was interesting because we saw much of that activity was happening outside our urban markets. So when you think about what people were dealing with at that time, and many still are, we found that interesting that some of our regions where we build second homes and lake regions and things like that had a significant uptick in activity. So when you add it all together, it was a challenging time, but because we were considered essential, we recognized that we were very, very fortunate. And by and large, we have come out of this on the other side, essentially in a growth, not a decline.
Okay, wonderful.
System-wide.
Good. It's good to hear.
That is a positive. That's a positive note.
But again, we had no idea at the time, right? So we obviously cut back some of our home office team. We've since brought them back, but it was a scary time for all of us. And when you're running an operation like any franchise, you recognize you have an extreme amount of responsibility to each and every one of those partners who has really banked their entire life and future and their family's future around what you do. And we take that very seriously. I know every franchisor does, but because of the nature of our business having a very, very long tail, any of our projects could last anywhere from 3 to 35 months. So there's a lot of moving parts, a lot of things that can happen during that time. But otherwise, this has been both a learning opportunity for us. We think we've become a better management team. We track our numbers a little bit tighter than we ever have, and we were pretty good at it to begin with. And we feel like we have helped our franchisees keep a very, very lean business model, which is core to what we do anyway. So we're a no-risk, lean business model.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're being tested in ways you never would have wanted to be. We're all going through this experience. We don't really have a choice, but what we're finding through the interviewing process is that most organizations are getting better for it. Right now, the results might not be there. The restrictions may still be there. But the effort and the focus on the concept of franchising is at an all-time high, right? I hear a lot of people saying their communication is better, the participation from their partners or franchisees is better. There's more innovation. So it's working the way franchising is supposed to work, right? And so with that being said, and Rob, this being near and dear to your heart, how does it look for franchise development? How are you guys addressing that, and what does that look like for you going forward?
Well, I'll try to answer this, guys, in a way that doesn't sound like we're tooting our own horn, so to speak here, right? But we believe that as horrible of a time this has been for everybody, and a scary time in a global pandemic, first one, and anybody who's alive today can remember, at least those of us in this hemisphere, we kind of felt like we were built for this. And I think a lot of franchisees and franchisors would probably tell you the same thing, which is the strength of the diversity of your locations. If you've got all your business into one central location somewhere, and something happens there, whether that's natural or man-made, the risks go up dramatically. So we feel like we were built for this, but mostly because our central premise to a contractor is one of the most dangerous things you can do is enter a contract to build a home for someone. And we always joke and say, who in their right mind would have taken two of the most litigious industries you can find, franchising and construction, bring them together, right? Who in their right mind would do that? But because we are a very lean model, and we don't take on the risk, 100% of our projects are client funded. It's actually attracted a number of contractors that we've been speaking to for a long time. They reached out to us and said, you know what? This is all making sense instantly for me, because think about it. If you're being honest, I've built a business. Let's say I have Cecil Construction or, Ganley Construction, and I've spent 10, 15, 20 years building this brand. I'm very proud of it, as I should be, perhaps. Very successful. Why would I want to throw all of that away? So that's an initial obvious reaction and a great question. And it's one, obviously, that we can answer very well. But for many of them, they saw now that most construction companies, you are building your infrastructure, and typically that's people and equipment and resources for the future, for revenue you have not received yet. Whereas in our model, we have elasticity. So if you have a down cycle, all at once, you're not using the resources as much as you would. So our back-end system, we have full end-to-end accounting. So not just bookkeeping, but full-on accounting up to and including year-end tax prep, everything. So I have a very, very sophisticated construction accounting team that's led by Katrina McLaughlin, our CFO, and then a whole group of controllers and a series of experts underneath them. And so obviously, if you have a number of projects on the go, you're tapping into all of the operations and accounting teams a lot more during that time. But if all at once you go off a cliff, those costs stop. Unlike in a typical business where you still have all of this overhead that you're continuing to maintain. So that's one of the reasons why many of our more successful contractors who are running very large multi-million-dollar businesses, they realized that by having this elasticity, it allowed them to be able to scale, offset the risk, and also for many of them to open multiple offices in different regions.
Well, that's good to hear. So your model's a little bit different, and you have different pros and cons naturally during this time. So that's good. The idea with this initiative is to give words of wisdom for those franchise owners and those franchisors that are out there trying to figure out not only how to survive but thrive. And this last phase of this initiative is kind of winding down with a celebration on the 4th of July, which is going to be an online celebration just to
Nice.
kind of give everybody a pat on the back and say, hey, we got through those 3 months. And not that it's going to be over, but hopefully we will have come a long way to recover, and we got through it together. So we look forward to that. But when you think about your team, your franchisor team and your franchisees, how do you see any stories of either franchise owners or customers or innovation that happened within your organization that really stands out in your mind as something that would be inspiring to the listeners?
Well, I probably am saying things that others have said, which is communication is key. Also being brutally honest. Not everything is good. And so we felt get out in front of it as fast and as hard as you can. We would much rather be accused later of overreacting than being caught, flat-footed. But just like we're talking today and using this technology, many of our partners never thought that they would be able to meet like we're meeting right now and essentially work through a project plan, because we have an extensive project planning process that happens prior to construction in our model. They never thought they would be able to get in this type of environment and talk to homeowners like yourselves and ultimately educate them to the point where they were able to make a decision and sign a planning agreement and get into planning during this downtime. And so for our business, it was which was we were able to use this downtime to emphasize the smart ways to do business with us in the first place. And we didn't necessarily need to be physically across a table, although we would all prefer that, wasn't necessary. And second was to ensure that our franchisees, their own clients, were aware that we had done absolutely everything we could to ensure that everything that we promised them, whether it was before COVID or post-COVID, that we are absolutely in a position to be able to carry that out and carry that out in a safe and smart way. Guys, as you say, there's pros and cons for everything. For us, the pros might have been our diversity and the fact that we were considered essential in most locations. But the con is also that when you have a large ticket item, average project value for us is, near $500,000. There's a lot of fear that can be entered into the space very, very quickly. So it was about, staying true to your core values, but also ensuring that you're communicating to those clients to say, we're going to plan for every eventuality that might happen. And we're going to have a plan for that in advance. And if something happens, a second wave, because such of a long tail that we have with our projects take so long, for all we know, we could see a second wave in the autumn. They're saying we might. So we're building in contingency plans now to say, if that were to happen, here's how we would do it. And so that's the only advice I could give is to, the first time none of us had a chance to prepare for it. This is a great opportunity to say, what did we learn? How do we put that into place? So whether it's COVID or something like that or something completely different in the future, we're ready to be much more nimble when something comes along. And I think that's a hallmark of a great organization, a great leadership, is to be prepared for anything that might happen and have a plan for it. Because your franchisees, at the end of the day, that's what they're buying into. They're counting on you to be able to look a little bit further down the horizon and know that when something comes up, you've got their back.
Yeah. Well, and we always like to focus on the community of the franchise organization model, that you're never alone. And that's really been evident in just about every franchisor and franchise owner we've talked to in the last couple of months for the podcast, that the community that they have with the franchise organization and the other franchise owners has really been something of importance to them. And
I believe this time, this COVID event will continue to drive more eyeballs toward the franchise world because of that reason right there. Is that when it's fine to be alone when everything's great, but when it's not so great, do you want to be out there alone, or do you want to be with other like-minded people who are there to support one another? It's pretty simple, right? So
yeah.
It's the worst kind of situation, but probably the best kind of endorsement for the franchise model and for the industry.
100%.
Everybody we talk to is just seeing that community flourish, right? The interaction, the communication, the ideas, and some are saying, look, we're changing for the better right now, right? We want to get out there again and do what we did again, but right now we're optimizing, right? We're getting better, we're learning more, and so it's been exciting to hear that from folks.
It is exciting, and I think you'll see a lot of younger people take a new, fresh look at franchising as well.
Yeah.
Because
we anticipate a boom after that's already starting, frankly. I think because there's a lot of interest, there's a surge, there's people that are at home that can't get out, and they're doing their research online, and so we're seeing a surge of interest. And so we anticipate that there will be a boom after this, and that franchising will grow in powerful ways. And I think you're right, Rob, that the younger generation, I write articles and speak a little bit on the millennial factor. We have to bring younger people into the industry. And so the technology-enabled industries are going to be more likely to attract those folks. And it's really mission critical to bring in young blood into the franchise industry, isn't it?
It absolutely is. I mean, our project managers are very different. It's a very different role than you would expect in a project manager of a traditional construction company because of our business model. Without a franchise system, that wouldn't be possible. It's very attractive. It's a really great career track. Many of our franchisees today were once project managers inside another franchise. So the opportunity to come in, learn about an industry, and then ultimately own one or more. I have one partner I'm thinking of who started as a general carpenter, moved up to a project manager. He now owns 2 Alair franchises.
Wow.
and doing
Awesome.
very, very well. So there's real opportunities in the franchise space that really nobody else could, your typical corporate path just can't compete with.
Yeah, and some people get confused because they think of a franchise as a food franchise. They don't know that you can find franchise opportunities in just about every category these days. So franchising in its simplest form, I always say, is a way to expand a brand around the country, around the world, and find like-minded people that want to collaborate and be part of that brand, right? So,
Exactly.
we're all in the franchise industry, but building homes and making hamburgers are completely different models, but they're still both in the franchise industry. So franchising in the simplest form is just a way to expand a brand and really have the scale of training and support and community and technology and resources and all the wonderful things that come with it, right?
That's exactly right.
Awesome.
Well, tell you what, guys, that was good stuff. Before we wrap things up for this show today, Rob, I want to hand this to you. Is there any particular gold nugget, we like to say, anything that you want to make sure you leave with our listeners? Maybe some learnings from the last 3 months. Anything that kind of dawned on you as something that, that was really apparent these last 3 months. Something you want to share?
We doubled or tripled down in our scheduled group mastermind sessions, and we think that's played a huge role. We're a training centric organization, just like most franchises. But every week we have these crazy rules that we call them. Every week we meet in an all partner call, and all locations are there every Wednesday. We've added 2 or 3 additional mastermind sessions that everybody's attending. And it's been not just to help on the business side, but as you're just saying a moment ago, Rick, the ability to lean on each other and to communicate and say, hey, I've got this issue. Somebody saying, hey, I had that 3 years ago. Let me tell you about it. That's pretty classic inside of a franchise system. When you have something like this, double, triple down on your communication. Make sure everybody realizes, hey, we're in this together. Together, we're going to be stronger, and look for innovations everywhere. And don't be afraid to bring those forward, because we want to be smarter and a better organization on the other side. And most of the best ideas are probably not going to come from the top. They're going to come from somebody out there in the field. It could be your lowest level employee and one of your franchisees who sees something. If you don't create a culture where it's actually not just okay to bring it forward, but it's actually encouraged to bring it forward, whether it's been fully fleshed out or not, sometimes that's where the best innovations exist. So we've invited everybody to communicate more. It's been pretty fascinating. A couple of the most important things that we're bringing out of this was actually from those sessions, which was just, how do we learn from each other? What are we seeing? Hey, that's a great idea. That's now a new way we're going to do something.
That's great. And we've seen, if we're able to glean from the last couple of months and having these podcast interviews, you're right in line with what we're hearing time and time again, which is franchisors are communicating with their franchise communities like never before, more often and in different ways than ever before. Franchise owners are innovating and creating in ways we've never seen before. We're also seeing that the customer is looking for trust, and they're looking for safety. They're looking for being able to move forward and feel safe. So all of those are very, very important. Transparency, communication, those things are the gold nuggets, folks. You have to think through that in your franchise model. So, well, Rob, I'd like to thank you very much for joining us today on the Franchise Bible Coach Radio podcast with Rick and Rob extra. We got one extra this one around. But we do appreciate you joining us. So folks, if you're out there and you want to learn more about the Fight for Your Franchise Challenge, go to franchisebiblecoach.com. And if you haven't joined yet, you can still join. It's free, and you'll get weekly emails that will give you a free coaching session from me and an article and podcast, and everything is focused on a different subject every week. And it'll give you some things to think about and maybe some ways to help you get through this time, and not only survive, but to thrive as a business owner. So check that out at franchisebiblecoach.com. And Rob, do you have any final thoughts, or we want to say thank you to our sponsors too?
Yeah. I love these interviews. Rob, I really appreciate your input, your view.
My pleasure.
Yeah, especially coming from an international view as well. I want to thank our sponsors, SEOsamba.com. You can check them out again. They're the originators of the franchise marketing operating system. And once again, don't forget the Fight for Your Franchise Challenge. As Rick has mentioned, you can reach that at franchisebiblecoach.com. It's a name and an email, and you're in. So we'd love to see your names. We'd love to be working with you. That's about all I have there, Rick.
Thank you, Rob. And thank you, Rob Cecil from Alair Homes. And Rob, where do they go to learn more about your franchise?
You can visit us at alairhomes.com and or alairfranchise.com.
Perfect. And we've added your logo to the wall of fame at franchisebiblecoach.com. Folks, you can click on that logo and it'll take you to their franchise page. And where are you located? Where's your headquarters?
Our headquarters is in Nanaimo, British Columbia.
Nanaimo, British Columbia. I can't even say that. Nanaimo. Okay.
It's a beautiful, beautiful place. You should visit it sometime.
Oh, I've heard.
Yeah.
I've heard. We'll definitely make our way up there once we can travel a little bit more, huh?
There you go.
All right.
Well,
folks,
thank you guys for supporting the franchise industry the way you do. We really appreciate that.
Oh, well, you're welcome. We're all in it together. And I always say we're in the same storm. We may be in different boats, but we're in the same storm and we will get through it. If you ever want to get something done, you just find a bunch of entrepreneurs and that'll get done, right?
There you go.
Well, thank you, everybody. I'm Rick Grossman signing off for Franchise Bible Coach Radio with Rick and Rob. And remember to keep fighting the good fight. Bye now.